Hello, 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 everyone. There we go. Had to adjust stuff. Oh boy, it's still off. There we go. Had to adjust stuff for Ninja last week, and I didn't get it back going. How's everyone doing? Good morning, John. Good morning, Ro. Good morning, Jacob. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, McRangers. Good morning, Jake. Grand Rising, Christoph. Hello, everyone in the background. Thank you for tuning in. We got a backloaded busy week. So we will see what's going on. Last week of June, we had OPEX on Friday. Let's see, we still have topping patterns. Still have topping patterns. Will it turn into a potentially bigger pullback? We will see. Talked a bit about that on NinjaTrader. Feels like AZ here in Mid-Atlantic. How hot is it over in the Mid-Atlantic? Good morning, Royal Palms. Good morning, Tony. Hello, Charles. It hit 111, 112 at the end of last week. Weekend wasn't that bad, but the humidity was up because it's in monsoon season here, which means you get the combination of humidity and the heat, that is when it doesn't get pleasant. But you also get clouds, little fluffy clouds. So, all right, what do we got going on this week? We got Waller, who already spoke. He didn't really mention stuff with economic policy, but we have the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index. We got some 3 and 6 months bill auctions. We got daily speaking. Today, a very quiet day. Bowman tomorrow. Richmond Fed, Dallas Fed, home prices for what else do we have? Cook speaking. Remember, Fed meeting next week. Next week. So, what else? What else? We got the EIA numbers on Wednesday as always, but Thursday really kicks it off. We got the final first quarter GDP and PCE numbers that's the quarterly PCE numbers. We got jobless claims. We got Kansas City Fed, and then we have the monthly PCE numbers for May on Friday. And we have Michigan Consumer Sentiment final numbers for June. So Thursday and Friday are the fireworks day this week. So far, and NVIDIA, what is going on? Well, we got a multi-day drop in NVIDIA. Micron earnings this week. We'll take a quick look at that because it's a very slow week of earnings ahead of next quarter earnings. So, NVIDIA finally getting somewhat of a pullback. It will be interesting to see the secondary bounce in NVIDIA. If we look at the groups this morning, let's do a quick refresh. Technology, led down by NVIDIA, and is losing or pulling back, and everything else is doing good. Energy, crude remaining remarkably high. Good morning. Can we check on NVIDIA, please? We will take a look at NVIDIA. The chart. Remember, we have our Fed pause next week unless something extreme happens, and then we have still 2 cuts priced in, potentially. For the rest of the year, fear and greed, still in fear mode, with breadth and underlying strength not doing well, and breadth continuing to break down. So, that's where we sit. Earnings, there's nothing today. Tomorrow, after the close, FedEx. FedEx is very key to watch, at least for me. Then we got General Mills Wednesday morning, but Micron after the close on Wednesday, and Nike after the close on Thursday. So that's really the big ones this week. Going into stuff, we have a couple-day pullback so far. Thursday, Friday, since they're in the books, a 2-day pullback, but still ahead of the rotation zone. Just going in, let's do the macro look first, because very key. The very key area is 5,400 if we do get started to get a more significant pullback. Remember, we still have divergences on the weekly, and we are at weekly cycle tops, heading into all the PCE numbers and the GDP numbers. But my first key target would be 5,400. That's the 50% of the run up since the end of May and the weekly rotation zone. Just want to get that out of the way first. The bigger pullback area would be about 53.40 because that's the 62.5, and we start closing below that, I'll shift to an even bigger pullback. Remember, we're at a DeMark topping area potentially. They have not triggered yet, and we're at Elliott wave. So we got a lot of potential tops, but nothing has triggered. And the overall, you can still see the bigger pattern is the wedge. Because if we start triggering the wedge, then we could get the bigger pullback. But as I said on Ninja, you still got the seasonality going up. Now that's not a trade in itself, but you'd really have to start dropping below 53.40 on a closing basis before you're even in the area of triggering the bigger wedge and triggering the harmonics. So that would be a standard pullback. Probably cause people are so used to the market just going up all the time that probably people would be panicking in the streets, but it would just be a standard pullback. Going into today, though, the key support area is about 52.20 to 52.24. Remember, you have an old clear path down here that's been holding up. If it starts breaking down, it's about 55.05, and then you have that 5,500 area as the first little area of key support. Resistance really has to start getting above 55.50. 55.50. The CDK global half very disruptive at infinity. That work part-time, takes 6 hours to close a deal rather than 4. Yeah, that's the that hack with all the ransom stuff is with going on with the car dealerships is very disruptive right now. Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Anissa. No pullback until after November. Well, again, you define your pullback. We could easily get a short-term pullback. And the markets have been going up, 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 up. That doesn't mean it has to keep going. I mean, everybody says it's a no-brainer through November. If trading were that easy, it's just like the no-brainer trade that I keep hearing now is buy in July, buy because July has been up the last 10 out of 10 years. So it's a no-brainer trade. Whenever I hear a no-brainer trade, I sit up, could work, but I'm always looking for what are the potential flaws in it. Now, we get a nice, decent pullback without triggering a bigger pattern, could be a different story. Could be a different story. The NASDAQ. The first little support today I'm keeping an eye on is about 19.8. 19.8. The bigger line in the sand this week is coming in at 19.3. The tipping point is just remember about 19,000. 19,000. If we start closing below that, we could start triggering a bigger pullback. Okay, that's really key right there. The little mini wedge here it's not super tight yet on the daily, but if we started breaking down for that, we have the 19,500 is the first major target. 19.5. In the short term, we already broke the key support, which we did not break in the S&P yet. We broke the key support and we reversed that little clear path move from last Monday. So the first bounce area is about 19,950, but in order to get more sustainably bullish on a bounce, it has to get back above 20,070. Other than that, it's headed into some very key support right around this 19,800. 19,800 is the key area of support. The Dow, which has closed above the 62.5 back on Thursday, we could still see a retest of 39,950. Possible continued rotation out of tech, but into the large caps. So 39,950 is still a magnet price there. Key support coming in at 39,370. Russell, not doing much at all. The minor break area is 2052, but then you're slamming into very significant support at 2061. Breakdown area is roughly about 2035, and there's very key support at 2024. So overall, a range-bound trade until it breaks out of those levels on the Russell. VIX going elevated into the PCE GDP week. But the only key thing, if it starts to really climb above 1450, we start looking for the more significant pullback. The DAX, little bounce back up after completing, remember the overall little mini double, completing that, bouncing back up, but still expecting another rollover play. So watching for another rollover play in that, unless we really start closing above 18,622. I'll be watching for another rollover play. Notes stalled out going into all the information this week. So really don't have anything in the notes right now, either the futures or the yields. You can see the yield sort of trying to do a bounce channel against the prior breakdown area, but everything's going to trade off the numbers coming out towards the end of the week. So that's where that sits. Good morning, Heinrich. For the dollar index, little break with a so far below Friday's low. By the way, watching for a potential double bottom in the euro. If we trigger that, then I'll watch for a bigger pullback, and we still have a potential double top in the dollar index. But that would have to close back below the low of 104.69. So we're still a long way off from that, and we have the rising rotation zone in the way. And we're coming back into prior breakout area. So there's a lot of very key support. So if that double were to trigger, we could probably get a quick drop in the dollar. But nothing yet. Other than that, the recent breakout, with especially the close above the 62.5, still favors another rotation back up. Crude daily cycles rolling over, getting out of overbought, but very key support at 79.50 area. Even back down to 78.80 is still key support, even if it breaks the most recent support shelf. So I'm watching for at least a pause / pullback, and then we could see another move higher, but it needs to follow through on any move with a close just 81.95. Just remember 82. We start getting close above 82, it shifts the probabilities for potentially a retest of the high April area. Gold, by the way, this is now too extended to the right. We never triggered the double top. Just giving a bigger picture on gold. We are at weekly cycle bottoms in the weekly rotation zone without triggering the double pattern and holding support with a multi-week extended sideways. I am watching for a break up in gold. It has to follow through with a close above just roughly 2,400. Okay, now this might not trigger till closer to the end of the week, but that's what I'm paying attention to. So that's where we sit right there. Gold's going to be very interesting this week from my perspective. Silver, just getting that first target, bouncing strongly, but this 29 is very key support. And only able to get to the first target on a channeling pullback. The bigger picture on silver is it's holding the weekly rotation zone, and you can see, if I put a line on here, there's a prior key resistance becoming and holding key support. With weekly cycles back to the bottom, so potentially we could get the break up in silver. Also needs to follow through with a close above 31.25. Copper's the last one I look to for the bullish case right now. So, and this is just a mess. It's not a double. It's just a mess down here. Might have a lift. It's just a mess. I mean, on any bounce play, the key target would be 478. if it can get a close above about 458. But that's really about it there. The yen, back in major intervention territory. Remember, closed above the 62.5, little pullback, and now completed the 87.5 rule. Very lopsided double. It would need a intervention from the Bank of Japan, probably to trigger. But this has got to have them edgy. Very edgy. Now, I'm going to this key low with the reverse harmonic, so if it were to break above the last intervention topping area, this 160.20, what is it, 160.23 area, the targets would be 161.28 and 162.32. But this is going to be interesting to see if they come in. The euro, still against the rotation zone, but here's your double bottom pattern against the 75% harmonic. So that's the only thing that starts getting me watching the bigger pullback in the dollar potentially, and a stronger bounce in the euro, but that is not triggered yet. Would need a close above 107.61. Bitcoin, good old Bitcoin. Finally, the little mini double top pattern that triggered back on June 14th, completed. There we go. Done. Now, I'm going to be watching 62.305 on a closing basis. Why? If we close below there, we triggered an 87.5 rule as the next target, back down to about 58.435. Again, these targets are probabilities, not guarantees. So keep that in mind. Everything's in trading is a probability. But any bounce now, 64.250 is very, very key resistance. We are getting oversold. Daily cycles at the bottom. Weekly still has room to run down, and you do have a still bigger potential double top pattern. Just keep that in mind. So even with a bounce, this could keep heading lower. All right. All right, we got the spiders and the Qs. The spiders, right now, 544.28. The first key target on the upside would be 544.51. And then there's very key resistance about 545.30 to 545.50. Then you have another gap fill at 547. So those are the upside targets. The key support is Friday's low at this point, 543. You start breaking below that, the next major support level is 540.90 to 541. You break below that, your magnet price is about 537. The Qs, 478.28. The magnet price would be 480.18 on any bounce. And then you have a very key resistance about 481.35. Your support area coming in at 475.85 to 476. Below that, the major support, should we have a catastrophic or more catastrophic breakdown this week, would be to 468.01. This mini wedge pattern triggered on Friday, but it's still with the rotation zone right in the way. So it has to get below that rotation zone before that can really kick in. What else? We got NVIDIA with the reversal bar on Friday coming back into the rotation zone, the prior mini breakout area. Major support coming in about 119.50. Let's take a look at the bigger picture, because even to return to the rotation zone on the weekly is about 113. The key area I'm watching on a closing basis is back exactly at 100. That's the 62.5 from the run-ups in mid-April to last week's high. So that's going to be key. But, I mean, this is just fascinating. Now, I'm going to be watching over the next couple of days for a secondary reactionary bounce. a secondary reactionary bounce. Let's see where we put the low in, and then that's going to tell us a lot. Because when I talk about secondary reactionary bounce, and we don't have that yet because I don't know where this low area is, but let's just say it came back to the bottom of the daily rotation zone. It would then need to get back above 132.35 on a closing basis before I'd watch for a retest at high area. Otherwise, I'd be watching for rollover plays. Now, that's just a rough guess. If it does continue to pull back, we'll have to watch over the next couple days of where it sits and sets up for that bounce. But that's where we sit so far with NVIDIA. Tesla, nothing. Apple, also, last Thursday with a little follow through on Friday, triggered the double top pattern against the key expansion harmonic. So, still watching. Apple over the next couple days could easily pull back still to potentially 202.50, 202.42 area. So that's what I'll be watching when still daily cycles heading down and weeklies rolling over. And even if it goes through the bottom of that, we could easily return to the prior breakout level and the rising weekly rotation zone. Right around 197, 196.50. So do keep that in mind. So we're getting lots of little topping patterns too. Not saying it has to get there in a straight line, but we got to keep an eye on that. Microsoft. You can clearly see it here. There's also a little mini double. That would also pull it back to a major breakout area potentially. So, with daily and weekly cycles in the top area, might never trigger, but I keep an eye on some of these stocks, even if you don't trade them. Even if you don't trade them. Meta, just starting to try to break down. Remember, Meta has a gap back to 477, so that's what I'm paying attention to with Meta. So just stuff, you're getting some underlying tech weakness too. Micron, which has earnings coming up on Wednesday, and that had a major reversal bar. So this, going into earnings, this would have to get a close above 145.935. Otherwise, I'd be watching for another potential rollover play. And Micron is setting up with some major divergences on the weekly, potentially. So at least this week is in full-blown cautious mode, and then next week we got, hold on one second. We have why do I keep thinking we have Jerome Powell speaking. When's the next meeting? It's at the end of July. So we have Jerome. I think I misspoke earlier. I thought that it's not a Fed meeting next week. We have Jerome Powell speaking next Tuesday. So we're still in pause mode, but we're going to see a lot with Jerome Powell speaking next week. Also, keep in mind that about over 80% of the companies are in buyback blackout mode ahead of earnings, and that's going to continue to rise this week. So you don't have that underlying buying pressure in the market either. We got Powell on the 31st for the meeting, but we have, I think he's talking next week too. I think he's talking next week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's speaking. If it's that in front of Congress, I'm trying to remember. But I'll have to look that up, but we have him speaking next Tuesday. All right. So that's where we sit going into this week. Let's take a look going into the open. Not much, although very significant resistance on any bounce around this 55.35 area. So, not much to talk about there. With that, I will talk to everyone tomorrow. Have a fantastic trading week. Bye for now.